Light Talk. Lumen Brothers. Light Talk. Light Talk. Light Talk. Lumen Brothers. Light Talk.
Hello and welcome to Light Talk. This is Stan, and I'm broadcasting from my state-of-the-art studio in the swamps of Gainesville, Florida.
Hi, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas.
And this is David, high in the Rockies in Central City, Colorado. And we are the Lumen Brothers.
Yes, indeed.
Welcome to episode 63. And that's going to be my birthday coming up in a few weeks. And guess what? Today is Stan's birthday. Yay!
Hallelujah.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Stan. Happy birthday to you. Last year I had Marilyn Monroe sing it, but not this year, so.
She was booked.
Yeah, she was booked. So yeah, guys, we're back again doing this crazy little show. And I'm in Central City right now working on the two shows we're doing up here, Trovatore and the Magic Flute. And we just finished pre-lighting the Magic Flute this week. And we start pre-lighting Trovatore tomorrow. So that's kind of exciting, and there's a lot of video in that show. So it should be a lot of fun. You know, I think we talked about this before, the way it works up here. And actually it works this way in several companies, like the Lyric Opera Chicago and even at the Royal Opera House, is that you pre-light the show. You start lighting the show before you go into rehearsals, which is not the easiest thing in the world to do because, you know, if you're an organic type of designer, you like to see what's happening in rehearsals. However, if you just get the basic atmospheres and it gives you an opportunity to see what systems you have, it also gives you an opportunity to show the director what's happening on stage. The director can actually use that in their blocking, so they know, where all the exciting strokes of light are. So it's kind of a challenge for a director to come up here and do this, but I've learned to live with it. So that's where we are right now. Anything else happening with you guys?
Well, I'm preparing for some classes in the fall, and I'm waiting for a contract to arrive with a signature on it. So everybody seems to be on hold. We're doing a renovation of an auditorium in a local college. That should be kind of cool. It's going to be like a music space and a presentation space, and it's a nice room. It's going to be completely gutted, and so it gets a whole. So we're just using the shell. Great design team, and just waiting to get the green light and get the first meetings going.
That's fantastic. And Steve, you just opened your show off Broadway. What's up for you next?
Nothing, I don't think. I'm just kind of hanging out, getting through the summer, getting into the fall. I have some irons in the fire for Europe, but nothing I can talk about yet.
Okay, great. Well, just keep us up to date. That sounds really exciting. So, hey, guys, let's get to our first listener question. John in Tennessee wants to know, when did you stop being hands-on during the load-in? Well, that's a good question. I mean, I'll tell you.
What does he mean by that?
Well, you know what I think he means?
I think unloading the truck?
Yeah, I think helping, moving equipment, circuiting, just being part of the crew. And to me, it was really simple because when I started doing union jobs, you can't touch a light.
I was going to say, that's where the line gets drawn.
And there needs to be that separation. There really does. A lot of people feel that it sort of creates some sort of a stigma or some type of, compartmentalized. But in a way, it's really important because there are a lot of safety issues that are involved, things that electricians are trained to do that, quite frankly, I am not prepared to do and not trained to do. What do you think, Steve?
Well, I think it's hard not to be hands-on if you're in a summer stock theater somewhere, something that's small. I think if you're teaching at a university, it's not unusual to be kind of your own MELD, so there's some hands-on stuff right there. But I agree. I think if it's a union job, it's pretty much hands-off. I don't really want to work as a stagehand. I'm too old to do that. And also the people who are doing it are much better trained than I am. So
Right.
the work is going to move faster, and I'm just going to get in their way.
You know, it's really interesting because there are some situations, even though it's a union job, that the crew is very, very familiar with you. Like this crew up here, I've worked with for 20 years. And, you know, they're friends of mine. And it's an IA crew. And I don't touch anything. But sometimes I will ask them, you know, if you're near a light and you just want it moved a bit and you know that all the electricians are busy at that time, you know, I'll turn to the ME and say, you know, hey, Miles, would you mind if I touch this light? And Miles, 99% of the time, will say, sure, go ahead. Because that's just the nature of this particular type of crew. Now, I would never do that in Chicago. I certainly would never do that in New York. But if you're working at a smaller company, like Steve says, he's talking about summer stock, which basically this company is, then the rules are a little more relaxed. But you should always, always ask. And that's something I always tell my students. You know, it gets to a point where the assistant can't even move the focus tape, by the way. Usually an electrician lays down the focus tape in a lot of theaters. So you just have to be conscious of where the boundaries are and always ask. And if you're helping them out, chances are they'll say, sure, go ahead. But never do anything like run a circuit, never hang a light, because as soon as you hang a light and you tighten a C-clamp, that sort of makes you liable for that light hanging there.
As you were speaking, I was thinking of another context. Load-ins, you know, when it comes to moving heavy things, you know, I did that as a stagehand, and that was my job at times. I'm thinking about the difference between labor and some of that, and labor that's creative. So we did a project recently that was track light for art, and it was a very the trades were very, very in control of their operations, and the electricians really put this stuff in, and they're hanging the track light. In this case, is hung by the electrical contractor, but focusing the track light in a very, very precise way. Where in this job, it was really art. I really felt like they could maybe do that, but not really do that. They were really good at what they did, but focusing precisely, not so much. So I hired somebody with a theatrical background to focus for me. But the first day, I very respectfully asked the electricians, because I'm not covered to climb that ladder on a construction site. I'm going to be, I have my own health insurance, but they really are not supposed to let me do that. So I asked, can I go up and focus one to show how I want this done? Because it was very particular. And they looked at me and said, no, and they checked with the supervisor, and then they got back to me and said, yeah, okay. And then I went up on the ladder, demonstrated how I wanted it, and then the other person went from fixture to fixture. So I think, but generally speaking, I'm not going to hang it, because they're hanging this on T-bar ceiling, and they know how that went in, and I don't really, like you said, that's their specialty and not mine. But on the artistic side, when it came to focusing, I sort of needed to demonstrate, and they were okay with that. But different context. I don't know if that would happen. I can't imagine too many Broadway designers going up on the ladder to demonstrate a focus to the local one. I don't think that happens.
Right. Yeah, you got to be real careful, too. I mean, you just have to understand the politics involved, especially when it comes to union crews. It's sort of like if you're working with a programmer and you know exactly how to program a certain effect, you don't want to ask the programmer, is it okay to, touch the board? And the programmer feels pressure and says, sure, go ahead. And then all of a sudden they find, the rest of the crew finds out that you were actually programming on the board. That could get the programmer in trouble as well. So you always have to, be sensitive to that sort of thing.
I'm thinking of one other example outside of theater where it's sort of similar question. We were doing an installation at the Metropolitan Museum, and I was working with the company who was providing the specialized lighting equipment, but that equipment needed power. It needed to be placed in certain places. Where were the lines of where we're running fiber optic? And then the electrical contractors in Manhattan, let me tell you, that's a very strict jurisdiction. And there's a lot of very, very, let's say, really tough people who look over that. And if we wanted something to be even moved an inch, we had to ask the supervisor. The supervisor had to say, well, when the electricians get back from lunch, they'll move that. And you might stand there for an hour and nothing happens, because those lines of jurisdiction are just, and it's at the discretion of that job supervisor. Tim in Florida asks, How do you handle class size? My university wants to see 12 students enrolled in class. I can barely find 4 students interested in lighting design. Yeah, well, so this is a can of worms, in my opinion. It's what's going on in academia. It's about SCH, as they're called, student credit hours, in relationship to your load and how much they pay you and what your value is. It's really sort of a difficult question. I've been dealing with this lately myself. It's like, in fact, I was to teach a class last fall, and there's only 2 people who want to take the class. I can't have you teaching a class of 2. And I'm like, well, okay, but I don't know. This is my sort of metaphor. If you're a brain surgeon, not that I'm a brain surgeon, but what we do is actually more complicated than maybe we give it credit for. How many students do you think are on rounds with the neurosurgeon down at the hospital? What's the maximum number of neurosurgeons that one neurosurgeon should be training at any given time? 2, 3, 12? I bet you there aren't 12, right? So I would argue that what we do is highly specialized, particularly at the graduate level, which I don't get so much heat on when they're small classes. At the undergraduate level, and I don't know if Tim is talking graduate or undergraduate, at the undergraduate level, in our first level lighting design class, we include our scenic and costume people, but we still, maybe I'll get to 8 or 9 in a design class. In an intro to light and sound class, maybe there'll be a dozen. So this is sort of a question about what the university wants to do and its educational philosophy. And I know David and Steve will have more to say on this.
Yeah, actually, it has a lot to say about the direction of arts training in the United States right now and what's happening with STEM, what's happening with education for profit. What Stan said is absolutely true. I mean, you can look at other areas of education and say, why is it different? The fact of the matter is, and I assume this is undergraduate because that cap number of 12 seems familiar because this is something that I am going through right now at my institution. And we have a BA in technical theater. We do not have a BFA in technical theater. And in my advanced lighting design class, I am lucky if I have 4 students, 6 students. And we have been told quite clearly that if we don't have 12 students in any class, that class will be canceled. Believe me, I've been battling this windmill for years. So how do we solve this problem?
Well, I think, Tim, you're going to have to be aggressive about this. I mean, if you look at universities across the country, the average class size is about 23. So that's kind of the base standard right there. And then if you look at your institution, if you're a major university, then you probably have history classes, biology classes, psychology classes that easily seat 200 to 400 people. So there's a different mentality about how to deliver the curriculum. And we're kind of turning universities, we're kind of McDonaldizing them and getting people in and out very quickly. If it were me, my strategy would be to go to the chair and go to the dean. And probably the dean is who I would chat with. And I would come up with a strategy about the number of credit hours overall that your department is offering to the university campus-wide. If you have an intro to theater class with 30 or 40 or 50 people in there, that's going to help your case. If you're delivering the curriculum to a wide number of people already, then you can make a good argument with your dean to support you in offering a class of 3 to 4 people in it. So it's about numbers, but if you have the dean on your side, the chair is going to be on your side, I'm sure, from the get-go. But it's the dean you have to get the dean's ear in this, and the dean can then talk to the provost about it.
Well, I must say, Steve, that I've been there and I've done that, and that's wishful thinking. Because what's happening is because I make the same exact argument.
Just because it's failed where you are doesn't mean it's going to fail someplace else, because the chemistry between each department, each chair, and each dean and each institution is going to be different. It's simply going to be different.
So I do think that strategy that Steve points out does work. It worked here for a long time. It's sort of still working, but we live on this razor's edge of it not working. And I'm starting to smell that where I am here now. And this would be a strategy that and this may already be the case in other places, and maybe it's how it works. But here, students who participate in production, so acting, backstage, design, at the undergraduate level, all the people on stage don't necessarily get credit for being on stage. So basically, a large portion of my load is making sure those productions open and get lit. Now, the student who's designing, I make sure they're enrolled in a course. The students who are working backstage, they're enrolled in a course. But the actors who we make that opportunity possible for to be in production are not. And the argument we get back from the performance side of it is, well, we can't give them credit for performing because we don't even give them enough classes now. So they don't want to give credit hours to production. So therefore, my argument is, so you have people on stage performing, and the design and production area makes that possible. And those people performing on stage are doing that essentially as volunteers or extracurricular. And then there's this big thing about assessment. Everybody has to be assessed. Where's the grade? Where's the feedback? Well, how do you assess them? So in a sense, but if you counted the amount of hours and time for each student, not just the design and production, but each student who gets that production activity, you wouldn't have this argument. And in fact, in talking to my chair about this, he said, well, in Arizona, for example, which is where he used to be, every theater and dance student is enrolled in a course every semester called production. It doesn't matter what area they're in.
I'm not sure being enrolled in multiple production classes helps Tim, but I do think that what Tim can do is, again, make the case with the dean, who can make the case to the provost, the difference between a lecture class, which can handle 200 to 300 students, and a performance class or a hands-on class. And it's kind of a slippery slope. You've got to be a little careful about this. But I suspect if you have any type of music program at your school, probably they're teaching both large and very, very small classes. They're teaching a one-on-one class to an oboist or to a violinist.
Plenty of that. And Steve, you used a word in your answer called, sometimes you have to get aggressive. And I've never had to do this at the institution I'm at now, but in the past, I have stood up and said, you know what? Okay, fine, cut it. Cut the lighting classes, turn them off, fire me, have some undergraduate student who likes lighting, plug them into the design positions and hire somebody from the outside to come in and mentor them and see how that works. So in other words, if you really got that problem, then pull the trigger.
My argument is always with the dean, and that comes down to the dean needs to know who you are, sure. What is your contribution to not only the department, but to the university. And if you're anonymous, if the dean has no idea who you are, then you've already lost your case. So you've got to be, we talk about getting jobs. You've got to be social. You've got to let these people know who you are and what you're doing and what you're contributing, and not be the silent person standing on the sidelines getting upset because they don't understand your problem. They may have never heard your problem.
No, I think it's a really good point, Steve. And I've been successful and I've had deans who really appreciated once they learned what I did, they were amazingly supportive. So that point, I can't overemphasize Steve's point there. I think it's really, really true. They got to know who you are and look for ways to do that.
My dean certainly knows who I am, and so does my chair. The problem is in the upper levels of the university. And if you look at what's happening in places like Wisconsin, where the humanities are being devalued, it may not have hit your schools yet, guys. Steve teaches at a private university, and Stan teaches at a Research One university. But when it comes to a lot of state universities, and I don't know where Tim teaches, I'd be very interested to find out. But if it is a state university, he's probably going through the same stuff that I see happening throughout the country.
Well, let me be clear about this because you throw out that term private university. In regular session, we have to have 12 students to make a class. And in summer school, 8 students to make a class. So there are numbers that we have to meet. My whole argument is that there are exceptions to those numbers, and you have to go argue your case.
But in a lot of state schools, those exceptions are disappearing.
I want to illustrate Steve's point a little bit. One thing that might help Tim on the ground, and Steve's point about making the case to your dean so your dean can make the case up the line. One thing that my former dean did that was really pretty good is she came to watch classes, and she watched the level of engagement that went on in my classes and other classes, and I think that really helped her to be able to. A lot of these problems exist, I think, because people who are in decision-making positions are often looking at something in the abstract. They're not on the ground. I think the same could be true about convincing a politician about why they should support the arts. It doesn't work to make a speech at them. It doesn't work to tell them stuff. What works is to show them stuff. And so I think when the dean comes to your class and sees you walking around from drafting table to drafting table or computer to computer and giving individual advice to each student and then seeing what they put up when they have a project, they go, wow, this is not like teacher standing in front of a screen lecturing to a class of chairs, and it's a different experience. And when they see it viscerally, I think it is much more potent. And I think that's part of what Steve is saying is in terms of making your case. The case is stronger when they see it, not when they hear it. They have to experience it. And I've had that work both in this scenario. If a dean comes to tech and watching you mentor your students through that process, they go, wow, I didn't know this is intense. They really start to get it, and then they can communicate it when they've experienced it themselves. So I think that might be one way that Tim can sort of help us. Invite your dean. Make an email. Don't be afraid. Email your dean, say, hey, I'm teaching this class on Friday, and my students are going to be showing some work, and I'm going to be going through this workshop about this and that. I'd love to have you. That will help.
We have a question from across the Pacific. It is Gloria in Hong Kong, and she writes, any suggestions for a good LED Fresnel? Well, Gloria, there's a number of good LED Fresnels out there. Quick search on the internet, I found a Dutch company, Razor, Italy, Lupo, Mole Richardson, ARRI, Altman out of the United States, and of course, ETC has a Fresnel adapter for the LED ERS line. All of those are in the range. All the lights are in the range of $1,000 to about $3,000. The Fresnel adapter from ETC is about $500. The Fresnel that I lean toward, that I use, is the Philips Strand, the 400F. The 400F is an LED fixture that has a range of 3,200 to 5,600. It emulates a 2,000 watt Fresnel. So I like the Strand 400. They also make a 1,000 watt equivalent called the 200F. They're primarily used in television and studio work, so it's like a stealth campaign. They don't seem to push this hard for the theater, but they're fantastic lights.
I haven't seen those. I don't have to look at the Strand ones. I took a look at the. I don't have any, and I haven't really shopped for one, but I did look at the Chevet and the Elation, and they both look like really nice products.
I've seen the Chevet one, and it's a nice product. I love the ARRIs, and I'll tell you, I've always loved ARRI, and I actually learned about ARRI when I was interning for John Gleason way back when I was a grad student. And he was using all these ARRI Fresnels, television lights, basically, for his, for his theatrical work. And they were just so beautiful. I mean, the optics were amazing. They're very expensive, no doubt about it. So when I was in LDI a few years ago, I stopped by the ARRI booth. They had a bunch of LED Fresnels, and they are quite beautiful. So yeah, I don't even know how many tungsten fixtures there are left. I mean, I see a lot of film shoots because I live in Southern California, and I see a lot of stuff happening on location, and everything is LED. I haven't seen an arc fixture or an incandescent fixture in I don't know how many years, but everything seems to be LED right now, even exterior shots.
You are listening to Light Talk with the Lumen Brothers. And Light Talk is sponsored by
the Terre Haute Production Table Mascot Company. The production table should be a place of calm and serenity, where creative ideas grow from buds to choking vines. But just when you are in tune with your creative center, an actor strolls by and grabs a handful of trail mix. Hey, actor, we are here to light you, not feed you. So how do you keep these pesky lowlives away from your island of nirvana? Adopt the new production table mascot from the Terre Haute Production Table Mascot Company. Has that solar-powered garden gnome lost its chutzpah? Try our new production parrot. It will verbally abuse any stranger that dares to approach you. How about our misbehaving monkey? Our monkeys are trained to project all types of bodily fluids at unwelcome actors approaching the lighting desk. A team favorite is our new production pit bull. Watch those unwanted interlopers run down the aisle in fright. Chaos ensues. Make your next production free from any distractions. Buy your new mascot from the Terre Haute Production Table Mascot Company and let the fun begin.
And now, back to Light Talk.
Ellen in Denmark writes, what was the first design you ever created and how do you feel about it now? Oh, God. I've
been thinking about this all week.
I'll let you go first.
Three.
Since you've thought about it for a week, I've got to come up with this. So go ahead.
Well, I thought about 3 early productions that I did in the early part of my career and what I thought about them. And I'll just rattle them off quick. I lobbied real hard to light The Good Women of Setsuan. That was very, very early in my career. I did the Affective gamma rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds, and I did a dance concert. Those would be like the 3 that I think about in my very, very beginning when I really knew nothing about what I was doing. I think what I think about them now is, well, okay, let me give you the bad, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The bad was lighting a dance piece and not knowing that Alvin Nikolai was in the room. And that he was a guest choreographer. And I put a red psych up against a red dress. And my mentor said, Stan, do you see any problems with that? And I said, well, she's got a red dress on, so I thought I'd put some red light behind it. And he said, yeah, but, you're not creating any contrast. She's disappearing into it. And she said, try blue. And then I saw the difference and I got that. So it was so green, I didn't know what I was doing. And then actually Alvin made some comments at me because I used a downlight on a woman who, and anyway, that's another story. But it was great to get that critique from him. And on the other 2, on Marigolds and Good Women, I had interesting ideas. My execution was probably pretty rough. But I understood I had conceptual ideas, and in hindsight, they were amateurish, but I certainly was passionate. So my passion was always there, and I learned a lot from those processes. So those would be the 3 that I recall, and I feel good about that. When I think about those now, I remember how excited I was to get the opportunity to light a show and make design decisions, and I still get excited about that on any project I get today.
I did The Little Prince when I was 18 or 19. It was the first show I lit in college. And, I had maybe 30 lights in a black box space, a 2-scene preset console. There was no scenery. There were 3 or 4 cubes on stage that actors were using. I had a patch panel. I just remember how difficult it was, the kind of pressure of not messing it up. And, you kind of not really knowing what you're doing, but you kind of seen things done. You think this might work or that might work. I just remember how difficult all of it was. And at the end of the whole thing, kind of a sense of accomplishment. I think it was probably, realistically, it was probably a 1-cue show. Probably all 30 lights had to work together to make something decent on stage. But still, it was at the end of the day, I was kind of hooked, and I thought this could be fun. I remember the lighting teacher being very kind and helpful along the way and asking questions that I probably gave really bad answers to or naive answers to. But, there was just a sense of accomplishment at the end of it. So, yeah, The Little Prince.
Yeah, I felt the same way, Steve. I felt that we did something cool.
You know what's really interesting? Something Steve said that I think has a lot to do with, our first productions. And I think it's the fear of failure. You don't want to screw it up. And I'm just curious, do you guys still feel that? In any way?
I think I've been faking it for the last 30 years.
But you feel some little bit of pressure, right?
Yeah, I think that's a healthy thing. I think that's normal. Yeah.
And I think that's important for our listeners, especially our young listeners, to know that, you get more and more confident as the years go by and as the shows go by. But there's always a little bit of tension there. And I think that's kind of exciting, and it's a good thing.
I think we always feel like at some level somebody's going to find us out. That
we're hacks.
Right, that we're hacks. But you reach a point where you sort of have that confidence, but I think that little bit of shall we say, doubt for any artist, or actually for anyone, whether if you're the president of the United States or you're a lighting designer, you should always have some self-doubt, because or else if you don't, you get arrogant. And if you've read the Greek tragedies, which I know all three of us have, think about, which we do when we're young theater students. We read those Greek plays, and they teach about hubris, and we really need to always sort of maintain that humility in life, and particularly as artists. I think it's really, doesn't mean you don't have confidence, doesn't mean you can't walk into a room and project confidence when you need to, but inside, I think it's a little healthy to have a little bit of humility and self-doubt. I think I might have said this quote before, but the one thing I learned when I went on sabbatical and I spent time at the Smithsonian around some incredibly smart people, I realized, and this is sort of the gem from the takeaway, was if you are the smartest person in the room, then you are in the wrong room.
Yeah, right. That's true. You always want to be challenged.
You just don't learn anything that way.
I think the thing you learn along the way is, or at least what I've learned along the way, is learn how to listen. I think that's the skill. It's not so much confidence, it's listening. And if you're engaged in listening, then you can see which way the ship is sailing. And when it's your turn to speak, people have a tendency to listen to you. I just did this show in New York, and the thing that strikes me about it is how good the stage manager was, how good the production manager was. I had a great assistant. I had a solid director. And there was a sense of camaraderie. We're all in it together. Everybody's contributing. No one is, on the sidelines. No one is a lesser individual. And everyone is communicating clearly. And so for me, communication and listening, that's something that you learn. You get your technique gets better, your bag of tricks get better as you do it. But if you can't listen to the other team members, then you're never going to move very far up the food chain.
What is that expression, Steve? That God gave you one mouth but two ears, so use them?
I thought it was pay up, sucker.
Well, speaking of listening, if you listen really carefully, you hear that Hammond organ solo. It tells us that once again, you've spent your Saturday morning listening to Light Talk. You can listen to Light Talk every week on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, and Spotify. And don't forget to join Light Talk on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast.
In other words, look before you leap.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Central City, Colorado, Gainesville, and the Republic of Texas.
And be sure to tune in next week when we discuss why so many different names for the same thing. What is your go-to trust company? Home run, what is that? And I have an AA degree. It seems that is not enough.
All that and a new sponsor, Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Light Talk. Lumen Brothers. Light Talk. Light Talk. Light Talk. Lumen Brothers.
Nice.